Theater is the act of creation. It is the taking of various components and putting them together to create something new and alive. But what responsibilities do we have for what we create and send out into the world? These are the themes of Frankenstein. I'm Lenny Scovel, and this is Stages. And today we are at the Magnolia Theater at the Lincoln Center with OpenStage Theatre and their current production of Frankenstein. Joining us today is the director of the show, Peter Anthony. Welcome, Peter.
My pleasure.
So, Peter, this is not your mother's Frankenstein.
Nor is it Hollywood's Frankenstein.
Right. So this isn't the dragging monster with the big green head. But it is more true to Mary Shelley's vision of this story, yes?
Right.
So tell us a little bit about this version of Frankenstein.
Well, this was commissioned by the Royal National Theatre in London and was adapted by Nick Dear. And it premiered in 2011, with Benedict Cumberbatch starring in it. So it was a great success, big success. And of course, being that the Royal National Theatre requested this adaptation, it's a serious piece of theater. It's not camp, it's not for children. It is, as you said, more true, very true to the spirit of the novel. The main difference, though, is that the novel basically tells the story through Victor Frankenstein, through the creator of the creature. Nick Dear's adaptation has made it through the prism of the creature's point of view. So that's the main difference, which is kind of really fascinating, because it's really about following the creature from being an emergent being, almost a blank slate, and acquiring faculties of being human, from being very childlike to learning language, and then learning aspects of human nature, becoming educated, becoming literate, appreciating poetry. And so that's kind of the trajectory and arc of this adaptation, is following the creature's arc. And of course, obviously, certainly Victor's is intertwined in that. But that's the main difference. But as far as a serious look at the issues that Mary Shelley was dealing with, this does it.
Yeah.
And yes, it's a serious piece of theater.
Yeah, and I know that at one point the creature thinks of himself as Adam, as in Adam and Eve, right? He's the birth of something new. And my take on it to some degree is that then therefore the character becomes sort of an allegory of us as humans, right? Sort of finding our way and figuring out who we are. What is it? How do we find our way in the world? How do we find our own identities? Because identity is wrapped up in this play quite a bit, yes?
He is not given a name.
Right.
He is abandoned by Victor. And so,
by his creator.
By his creator, yes. Yep. A lot of people think Frankenstein is the creature, but Frankenstein is the creator. Victor is the character who creates the creature. The creature is given no name and is abandoned. And so from the very beginning, there is a sense of a trauma as he is thrust into this world. And early on in the play, in fact, it's the second scene in the play after the emergence of him. He is experiencing a street scene where it's all chaotic and there's people going everywhere, and it's almost like he's being overstimulated by all of this. There's a tavern scene, there's people dancing, there's a street, there's a beggar, there's a fight, and he's trying to take all this in, and it's almost overstimulated. He's almost overstimulated by all of this stuff. So it's about him finding his way, because he's thrust into this world, stranger in a strange land. And it's only when he encounters in the forest a cottage where a blind man, DeLacy, takes him in. And because he's blind, he doesn't see that the creature is deformed, and so he's kind to him. And through DeLacy is how the creature learns how to read and how to appreciate poetry. And one of the things that DeLacy teaches him is through the Bible. So therefore, that biblical reference, he acquires that from DeLacy, and also certainly from the Milton poetry that is given to him through DeLacy. And of course, it's Paradise Lost, so that has the biblical underpinning in that. So that he acquires that as part of his education. So it's natural for them then to compare himself to Adam at that point. But then he also says, I identify with Satan, as he becomes, again, scarred psychologically. Even though he's scarred physically, he's scarred psychologically by his mistreatment by the world, and he wants to be accepted, and he's not. Mm-hmm. Except DeLacy, being blind, accepts him.
And the things that he learns about what it means to be human don't always reflect back favorably on us, right? Because he is such a sponge of everything that's happening to him, of all of these encounters, that when he finally confronts his maker again, he's very much like a mirror of us as a society.
Right. He's learning the negative aspects of human nature, as well as the kindness.
Right.
But he's traumatized, certainly, because there's a beautiful line where he says, he wants love. He says, all I ask is for the possibility of love, and he's denied that. It's this, the Victor is a very curious psychology, that he's so obsessed with left brain science, that he doesn't factor in that he's in creating life, that there might be, some responsibility to nurturing that life in a way that you give him kindness and welcoming him into a world, and even protecting him from a world that can be harsh, and he doesn't have that. And so he's left to his own devices. And so he learns, when he's lied to, that he responds in the same way.
Right. Now you touched on something interesting. So in that original production by the National Theatre, the two actors that played Frankenstein and the creation would nightly switch roles.
Yeah, it was Johnny Lee Miller and Benedict Cumberbatch.
Right. And so they would switch off from night to night. And as I thought about that, I wondered, that's more than a gimmick, right? To me, it highlights that these two characters are playing two parts of something same.
Yes, I mean, there is in the novel this doppelganger, dual aspect to that. Victor and the creatures almost can be interpreted, if it weren't for the objective presence and reality of the creature, you could read into it that the creature is a projection of Victor. And so there is this sense of the double. And in fact, as the play progresses, and of course as the novel progresses, you see this kind of interchange that the creature becomes less monstrous and Victor becomes the monster. And certainly at the end of the play, in the Arctic, where the creature has been leading Victor on, and Victor comes on, he's completely exhausted, and he's in fur, and the creature is in this fine finery and laying out the dinner of seal meat, and he's more refined. He becomes the human, and so it's like the reversal that goes on at the end, and so it's beautifully tracked by the playwright in that way, that he dressing the creature in some fine frock coat and breeches.
Also joining us today are two of the actors from Frankenstein. We have Heath, who plays Dr. Frankenstein.
That's right.
And Timothy Ackerman, who plays the creature. So first, Tim, I got to say, it's amazing. This is the part that you were obviously born to play. Finding an actor that looks like you was a godsend for Peter Anthony. So this is amazing.
Well,
though.
he didn't know what I would look like if I shaved my head. So.
But this is good. So how long? How long does it take them to get you into this makeup?
About 2 hours.
And are you doing some sort of, does that figure into how you're prepping for the show as they're doing the makeup?
I would love for it to figure into, but it's just, I have 2 hours and that's it. And if I'm lucky, if everything goes well, then I'll have some time to warm up.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's kind of sad that I don't get to join them in their warm-ups.
It's true. You are missed.
You're running warm-ups again, I take it.
Yes, running warm-ups. And we do a series of vocals and physicals, but we only have 15 minutes to do it. But
They could just wheel me out in a chair
Right.
and I could do some of them.
yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about what does go on, though, in the pre-show, before the audience is ever allowed into the house, right? And there's a fight call for this show?
Yeah, there's a fight call for safety and pacing, because no matter how small the fight or how big the fight, you always want distance, eye contact, and breathing. And if one of the actors are tired, that can call into it. And you notice it at fight call, so you can regulate how the fight's going to go on stage as far as performance goes. But it's just to make sure everybody remembers the fight and pace through it and make sure their targeting is on.
Right, because it's very technical. It doesn't happen randomly or by accident.
Right.
It's carefully choreographed.
Right.
And I think it's good to remember that staged violence is a particular art in and of itself.
Yeah. Well, and violence only happens like in music, in the musicals, where dialogue can only go so far, and then it's another part of dialogue. It just happens to be physical. Now you have to either decapitate someone or punch them down, but it's the same kind of musical interlude.
Right, it's scored.
Yeah.
Is really what it is.
Yeah.
Because I years ago I did a broadsword training, and I remember as we prepared the scenes for our certificates, that the fight themselves have acting beats within them, right? It's not like you're acting, and then you stop and you fight,
And
and then you go back to acting, right?
Right.
You've got to act your way all the way through that, and that's really the challenge.
Yeah, well, and because there's consequences to each fight, and it's supposed to exhaust you, and you have to go through each one of those beats and how each beat is reacting to the character, and then you can't go back once that exchange has happened. So you have to make sure that you look like you're limping afterwards if they broke your arm or leg or something. There are repercussions to those actions. However, they're all safe, so you make sure that they're safe.
Right.
But as far as like pre-show stuff goes, there's the fight call, then there's prop check, but that's all stage manager, making sure that all the actors know what they're doing. If there is a prop check, and make sure that warm-ups, vocals, and physicals happen. That's part of the stage manager's job as well. A light check, and then see, well, as the set painter as well, I have to make sure that the set looks good. So if there's any touch-ups I've got to do for each weekend or after every show, I got to look at the set and make sure that it looks fine.
Right.
But other than that, you know, that's just actors preparing.
Right.
But it's mostly just us joking around, which is a type of preparation.
It is.
To loosen the nerves and just get ready to perform the show. And I find, I don't know if you guys find this, but the more dramatic the show, the more ridiculous everyone is off stage.
Well, it's a trust thing, right?
Yeah.
It's a way that you establish trust and rapport across the cast, so that when you go out and you have to do that intense stuff, you've got each other's backs. Right? You understand that going forward. So Tim, talk to me about how you approached this character from a physicality standpoint. What were you thinking about as you started to explore what it means to be a character that's literally assembled from various parts?
Well, I started with a workshop on death and dying, actually. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was a meditation that we were led through by an individual who has a lot of experience with death, and he came very close to death himself. He was a cancer survivor. And so there was a meditation that he led us through where we actually would feel like we were dying and taking our last breaths, because from my point of view, being born is just the same as dying. So there's that same fear of going through the portal to the other side. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I started was with just focusing on what that would feel like in my psyche to die. So being a little bit less afraid of death, but also imagining being born, feeling, in the womb, but also being scared because it's not a normal birth. This one is rather traumatizing for
and your various parts went through the dying process before being reborn, right? You're made up of corpses, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's really the challenge is to try to imagine what it feels like to die. And my father died 2 years ago, and I was there for the whole process and watching the spark leave and depart and being there, in that moment. All these life experiences have really helped. I think about things like when my second son was born, the night he was born, I went out for ice cream, and it was raining and there was lightning, and I saw a dog that had been hit by a car, and I stopped the car. It was pouring rain, and I got outside and I picked up the dog, and the dog was still alive, and then it died, and I felt the spirit, just felt its spark go. It just went. And so it was like a day of birth and death in one. And so I think about that when I'm being born. I think about all kinds of spiritual stuff of like what it would be like to all of a sudden the lights are on and everything, your memory was gone. You have no recollection of your previous life, and you're just reborn suddenly into this world, and you have no idea where you are, or who you are, or why you're there.
And those are the questions that your character is grappling with throughout this whole show, right? Mm-hmm. So, somewhat famously, this iteration of Frankenstein was commissioned by the National Theatre in London, and somewhat famously, the two lead actors would switch the roles, right? Now, you're not doing that for this production, but
it was discussed at one point.
Well, and I can understand it, because my take on that somewhat is that the two of you, your characters, present almost like different sides of the same coin.
Yeah,
Right.
our characters are foils, and we, like if you take a balance scale, at one point I'm coming down and he's going up as far as like destructive, being human or humane or gentle or a gentleman, or what the idea of man is.
Because there's a lot of, one of the major themes running through this is about identity, right?
Yeah.
And how we know ourselves. And I take it that the two of you, your characters, really only know themselves through the interactions that you have with each other. So do you feel when you're on stage, or did you throughout the process work towards some sort of melding of how your two characters work in a kind of a yin and yang sort of way?
Yeah, it's like we're not whole. I'm one half, he's the other half, and we each want each other's parts that we don't have. So I'm sort of the dark, the shadow, and he's the white sheep, the light side. He went to school and has the girl, and I want all those things, and I don't feel whole without them. So I come to take them. And he does not have his shadow. He's been carrying around this sadness and this melancholy around with him like a giant sack on his back. And he wants that animal, that darkness, that shadow that I have, and he can't quite grasp it, and he just tries to get pieces of it,
Yeah, I'd have to, like, but not just a shadow, but like an emotional connection to what we call being the human condition, because it's all cerebral, and the lack of connection, human connection, which you are thrown in, or the creature is thrown into human connection and a cacophony of interactions, and deliberately he's bombarded, with people coming in and out of his life, but they're always negative in some sort of aspect, where they don't see him, but they see me. But he has everything of qualities of the human condition that I lack, or at least Victor lacks, the creature has.
And the other side of it really is the creature. Anyone who comes from a broken home is there's a higher incidence, much higher incidence of violent criminals in jail who are abandoned by their parents, and so that I think is the root of the story, is just what abandonment can do.
Right. How do we learn and how do we figure out our sense of self and our place in our society, right?
Literally lashing out to gain attention. Calm down.
So, from your two perspectives, what would you want the audiences to take away from this show? What motivates your characters? What do you want to impart to them as they leave here?
Well, I think the message for Victor, or if you're going to find one, is that everything that he wanted was in front of him, and he was unable to see it because his desire, or his intellectual side, told him that it couldn't exist as a duality. You can't have the same thing you want and have this thing that's already in front of you. He was looking for something else, thinking that he was smarter than what was being given to him. And so he's looking for something else, rather than happiness was at his grasp, in front of him. And one line says, I can bring her back, for his wife, who he just married, but never saw her before that. And so his one chance is completely gone and lost. So take your chances now while you still have them.
And for you, Tim?
Well, I think what I've been hearing from audiences after each show is the they're getting in touch with their own emotions just by watching us out here getting in touch with the characters' emotions, and so I would like for audiences to really feel the loneliness, and just like last night I was trick or treat last night, and there was all these kids coming up and they all were together, and then there was one kid who came up by himself, and I felt like, oh, that's sad that he didn't come up, he wasn't trick or treating with a friend, and I wondered about his life, and if he's struggling at school, and if kids are picking on him, and I just went on this whole thing of like,
made this story
just
for
because
this
he
kid.
wasn't, yeah, and I just like, oh, and and then I felt, I felt the feelings because I am not lonely. I have, wonderful, beautiful love in my life, and I don't feel that. So every chance I get, I want to empathize with people out there who are lonely, who are picked on, who are bullied, and they're human, and we just brush it by most of the time.
I think that's the beauty of what we do as actors, is we in society, we don't have permission to feel a lot of things, right? And what we're really about when we're up here doing what we do is that we're taking that on. We're going to do this for you and give you, the audience, permission to feel along with us, right? Because there aren't those safe spaces throughout most of our daily travels, right? You don't do that at work, and on
You
some
can't
levels,
say that,
right?
or-
On some
yeah.
levels, you can't even do it at home. There's parts that you have to withhold because you have a role to play, right? And so we'll take on all those other roles, and you're in the dark. It's okay. You can emote and you can feel, because we're going to give you permission to do that up here. Thank you. Thank you for giving that permission to everybody. Peter, thank you for joining us here today.
It's my pleasure.
OpenStage's Frankenstein runs here at the Magnolia Theater through November 24th.